At the risk of repeating what I already said in this week's vlog of The Flash, that's more like it, Star Wars Rebels. Good job. As you know, I did not care much for the previous episode of Star Wars Rebels. I thought it was really overstretched. I thought it focused too much on one singular concept that I didn't feel translated well to a 22-minute episode, maybe like a 7-minute short or something. But I just thought it was really thin. I thought it was kind of weak. This episode, no. No, this episode really maintained that feeling of classic Star Wars, right down to a similar setting as the original 1977 version. Where they're kind of navigating their way through the Death Star. I mean, this episode really felt. I think you could argue more so than any episode up to this point. This episode really felt like classic Star Wars. Maybe that's just the scenario talking to me, but yeah, I thought in terms of the character interactions, in terms of the plot, and even in terms of some of the designs, I thought it was real, and a lot of the and some of the jokes and visuals I thought was really reminiscent of the first Star Wars movie, which in the eyes of a lot of fanboys, you can't really go wrong when you harken back to that classic adventure feel. Now, the plot of this one is, Kanan is trying to train Ezra, but he's not really sure of himself. Kanan, I don't think, I could be wrong on this, I'm just kind of going by the hints that the show is dropping. Kanan, I don't think, was a quote-unquote Jedi Master when the Jedi were wiped out. And that combined with the fact that he's a little rusty, he doesn't really feel like he's a worthy teacher for Ezra. I mean, and this actually leads to a pretty funny line, but I'll get to that in a second. And all of a sudden, they get this news broadcast that Jedi Master Luminara, the Olivia d'Abo character from the Clone Wars, she's she's apparently being held prisoner in an imperial facility at such and such location. So Kanan resolves to go and rescue her so she can take over training of Ezra because he feels that she would be more equipped, and also he just wants to bust a Jedi out. Because he's obviously feeling very alone and isolated in regards to being a Jedi. So, how was this episode? Well, you could probably guess what's going to happen, aside from one twist that I felt was actually effectively dark. But yeah, this episode, I liked a lot of the character interactions. I felt that employing all of the characters in these and having them all interact with each other was better than just isolating Ezra and Zeb like they did last episode and really just kind of devoting the whole episode to them. I actually think that's what made the previous episode kind of slow and repetitive. But this one, no, they're all together. They're breaking into this prison, and like I said, they're cracking jokes. I mean, Kanan's like, new plan, and they're like, what's the new plan? And he's like, I'm working on it right now. And then in the elevator, Sabine is talking to Zeb, and she's like, I hate it when he changes the plan. And Zeb is like, let's hope this one works, or something like that. And the shot pans back, or it doesn't really pan back. It cuts to a wide shot of all of them in the elevator. And Kanan is like, I'm standing right here, And they're like, yeah, we know. So yeah, little interactions like that, I think, really help sell the camaraderie of this group, and help it not feel artificial, or maybe artificial is the right word. Help it feel more believable and less performed, as it were. I think it feels all the more realistic how this group of misfits would form this kind of family type unit, and crack these sibling type jokes at each other. So yeah, props to the little touches like that. And this episode also marked the debut of the, well, I'll get to that in a second. And also some of the interactions between Zeb and Ezra I thought were really well done. In this episode, more than any other episode prior, or at least to my memory, these two have interacted more poignantly than they have done before. And we get some classic Star Wars lines like "Do or do not. There is no try." And Ezra's like, "What does that even mean? How can I do something if I don't give it a try?" And Kanan is like, "That part always confused me too. Look, just try doing this, or do it this way, or focus on this." So he's kind of fumbling his way through this, and I actually think that's one of the reasons I like Kanan so much, is that he's not a Jedi in your typical Jedi fashion. He's a great deal more identifiable than a lot of the other Jedi we've come across in the franchise, because even the ones who were interesting like Obi-Wan, they're not really all that identifiable. And I may draw comparisons or parallels to the X-Men series, but in my opinion, the X-Men series is better. But that's a whole nother geek argument right there. I'm not going to open that can of worms. But yeah, the fact that Kanan isn't really quite sure what he's doing, again, makes him more identifiable in relation to the other Jedi Masters who up to this point have been very serene, very in control, very wise. And we look up to people like that, assuming they're not boring, like some characters were, like the Samuel Jackson character. He was boring, but we can't really identify with them. And Kanan is a little more down to earth, a little more, for lack of a better term, amateurish. So yeah, I like the approach that they're taking with that. How he's kind of learning just as much as Ezra is, as they form this kind of symbiotic relationship. And I actually think this plotline tied in pretty well to the introduction of the Inquisitor. Now, the Inquisitor has been marketed as the big bad of the show. You would think, considering when this show takes place, you would think the big bad would be Darth Vader, but no, it's the Inquisitor, and he's voiced by Jason Isaacs. Now, Jason Isaacs, if you don't know, is one of those go-to villain actors. I mean, you could argue that he's kind of typecast, but he's very good at playing a villain. I mean, Jason Isaacs is awesome. I mean, he was the bad guy from The Patriot. He was Captain Hook in the live-action, or the early 2000s live-action Peter Pan. He was the best part about that movie. He voiced Satan in the Castlevania Lords of Shadow games. I believe he voiced Ra's al Ghul in Batman Under the Red Hood. So yeah, if that's how you cast your villain for your Star Wars show, get the voice of Lucifer. Again, maybe I'm letting this cause me some. Maybe I'm letting this cause me to get biased. But yeah, Jason Isaacs actually is actually a pretty fitting choice. And you could argue, the design of the Inquisitor is pretty over the top. I mean, he honestly does kind of look like a Pinhead from Hellraiser. But in terms of a voice acting standpoint and how he's written, and how by his very nature he really tries to go for the psychological. I mean, from what little we've seen of him in this episode, it seems like he's very knowledgeable on many different aspects of the Jedi, and many individual Jedi. So he's kind of getting in Kanan's head as he's fighting him. He's fighting you psychologically as well as physically. And while I was a little disappointed that we didn't really get much of him this episode, or at least not as much as I would have liked, even taking bias out of it, I think they should have had him in the episode a little bit more, to really build up this presence. But yeah, judging by what little we saw of him in this episode, I think he has potential as a character to be a really frightening entity on this show. To the point where I wouldn't really care. I mean, if they do this right, I don't really think I would care if they got Darth Vader or not. Although, from what I hear, they're putting in an extra scene of Darth Vader in the ABC premiere of the pilot. So I don't know, maybe I'll check that out. But at the very least, to hear James Earl Jones in the role again. But I digress. If there was one problem I have with this episode, is that I don't really think the Inquisitor did enough. And I know I kind of already mentioned this, or I did already mention it, but let me expand on it for a second. I mean, think back to The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, why did we feel, why did the heroes feel defeated at the end of that movie? They felt defeated because Darth Vader, I mean, had not only lured them into a trap and taken one of their own, but but in addition, the rebels were on the run, and Luke lost his hand. I mean, things were looking pretty grim, and at the end of this episode, there wasn't really anything like that. I mean, it was kind of leading up to something like that with the whole leading them into a trap, and especially with that darker twist that I'm not going to spoil. Although, although I will say that I'm kind of surprised they got away with it on something like Disney. But maybe maybe I'm underestimating Disney because this is Disney XD. But I digress. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I don't think the Inquisitor did enough in regards to giving our heroes something to contemplate. I think there should have been just something that would have afforded us a sense of cost at the end of this episode. I mean, at the end of this episode, the heroes just kind of get away, and I think they were really onto something with that twist, and what is actually revealed to be the final fate of Luminara. I think they were really onto something with that, and I think they were really going in the right direction with that little twist. But but again, I think there really should have been just some physical strike to really hammer this home as a defeat. And maybe that wasn't the intention, but I think it would have made this episode much stronger if one of the crew members got captured, or maybe Kanan lost. I don't know, at the risk of going for the old cliche, maybe if Kanan lost a hand or something, or maybe if one of them got a scar, something that would have really hammered home this sense of this guy means business. Really hammered home this sense of defeat, and I think just having the minor sense of defeat revolve around this character Luminara that we have never seen before on this show. We've seen her in the Clone Wars, but on this show, we've never seen her before, and I just don't think that was quite strong enough. But yeah, aside from that, I thought this episode was fairly strong. And yeah, I'm sticking with the show because, like I said, I like the characters. I like their interactions. I mean, some jokes don't really work, but I'm liking the animation more as I see it. Maybe it's just because I'm getting used to it a little bit more. I like how it's really trying to get back to the roots of Star Wars, and yeah, like I said, I'm going to see where this goes.